Well, good morning, and a pleasant good Monday morning to each and every one of you. We welcome you to Dialed In. I'm Thom Brennaman. We come your way as you're probably trying to figure out at this point in time, and quite frankly, we're trying to figure out. We come your way twice a week. We come live on Mondays at 9:15 a.m. here on Chatterbox Sports, and later we post on the Believe Network. Fridays, we're both at Chatterbox and the Believe Network. Here on Chatterbox, we're on at noon Eastern Time. You can follow us on YouTube/Chatterbox Sports page. And you can always follow us, of course, in podcast form. Just download it wherever you find your podcast. Search Dialed In with Thom Brennaman, and you're dialed in. On Fridays, we like to have our big interview. We're working on who it's going to be this week. We've had Chip Carey from the St. Louis Cardinals. We've had Chris Myers from Fox Sports. Legendary columnist in Chicago, Barry Rosner. A great conversation with Justin Williams last week, sports columnist from The Atlantic, where we discussed the NCAA tournament, the college football playoff, which it looks like now they're going to 14 teams, right? And we haven't even done 12 yet. And then NIL. So if you're kind of unfamiliar with NIL and how it all works, I would highly suggest you download that podcast with Justin Williams, because I learned a lot, and I think you might learn a lot about how this thing is working. I mean, some of the comments made by Nick Saban. How about that in front of Congress last week? This guy walked away the most legendary coach in the history of college football. He walked away basically because of NIL. Casey McAllister, good morning.
Good morning, Tom.
Did you see that Nick Saban interview? I mean, he was in front of Congress, but then he had a really long interview with Brett Baer from Fox News. I don't know if you saw this interview or not. But Brett Baer is pretty much a straight down the middle. Whether you like Fox News, don't like Fox News, their philosophy, it's irrelevant. He is their news guy. He's a straight down the middle, sat down in an interview with Nick Saban. And Saban was telling the story about when they have recruits in on a football weekend. The recruits go to the game on a Saturday. Most times their families come with them. Did you see this story?
I saw the court hearing.
Okay.
I saw all that.
When he's in front of Congress.
Yep.
Yeah. So, he talked about how his wife was the one who kind of gave him what he referred to as the red alert. So generally what happens is, and all college programs do this, just not Alabama and Nick Saban, but when kids come in for a recruiting visit, you're trying to get them to come to your school. You'll show them around the campus. You'll let them spend some time with the team. It's a little tougher on a football weekend when they're actually playing, because the kids are trying to get ready for the game, the kids that are on the team. At any rate, on Sunday, they have all of those kids and their family come over to the Saban's home, where they have this brunch or breakfast, whatever it is, and they get to know the families a little bit. And Mrs. Saban, very active in all of this. So she says to him after one of these Sundays recently, she says, I don't know what we're doing here anymore. Said, it used to be we would talk about, are you going to look out for our kids? And there's still some of this. Is our young man going to be able to grow not only as a football player, but as a person? Academically, all of these kinds of questions. And, of course, family to family, all of that's going to vary, okay? The importance of some of those type of things. I mean, let's face it, most of them that are being recruited by Alabama, somewhere in the back of their mind, if not at the very forefront of their mind, they are thinking about playing in the National Football League. That's their goal. Should be. Good for them. But Saban's wife says to him, you know what? It used to be, it was that question. It used to be, it was that question. It used to be, it was that question. Now the only thing they're talking about is how much money they're going to make in NIL.
It's sad.
It's interesting because we talked about this, and again, I suggest you go back and download that interview with Justin Williams, because we got into all this kind of stuff about where it's going, and now all of a sudden you're hearing coaches come out and even congressmen come out who understand it, whether you like Tommy Tuberville or not. Again, irrelevant. I'm not talking about his politics. I'm not talking about when he coached UC. But he was a major college football coach in his career for a long time. He gets this part of it. And, there are all kinds of proposals on what should be done, what can be done. We'll see how it goes. We invite you to follow us on X at Thom Brennaman TV. And here on this Monday, it's great to have you with us. Now, they call it March Madness for a reason. And if the conference tournaments are a preview of the upcoming NCAA tournament, this is going to be complete and utter madness. Stop and think for a second. Of all the number one seeds in conference tournaments that lost over the weekend, some of whom didn't even get to the final game in the conference tournament. Carolina got there, but got beat. Houston was obliterated by Iowa State. Tennessee bounced in the semis. Arizona bounced in the semis. And that's just to name a few. Even powers like Kentucky and Duke, they lost long before getting to their conference finals. So that means, of course, that bids were gobbled up in many cases by teams that went into the weekend with very little, if any, chance to make the big dance. And, of course, we still know those other teams were going to make it. So, if you are St. John's, and we're going to use them as Exhibit A. Now, some might argue Providence. Some might argue Seton Hall. The Big East really got snubbed on this thing. What, 3 teams? They got Creighton, Marquette, and they have UConn. That's it from the Big East, right?
Shocking.
It's shocking. Oklahoma, out. So those teams are out. 6 teams from the Mountain West Conference are in this tournament. And then you have someone like St. John's playing in the Big East who's not. Teams like Seton Hall or Providence that have beaten Marquette, that have beaten UConn. Dayton, we talked about Dayton last week. Dayton is a 7 seed. 7 seed. They did not win their conference tournament. They finished 3rd in their regular season in the conference. A 7 seed? We're rooting for Dayton, but man, Flyers are playing in the West region Thursday against Nevada at 4:30. A win, and they probably meet the number 2 seed, Arizona. Then there's Kentucky. Wildcats are in as a 3 seed in the South and take on Horizon League champion Oakland Thursday night at 7:10. There is enormous pressure on this University of Kentucky team in this tournament. I was just getting a cup of coffee at UDF, one of our sponsors, this morning. Guy gets out of his car. He's got a UK sweatshirt on, UK hat on. And I said, "How we looking?" He said, "I have no idea what to expect from this Kentucky team." But think of the pressure. Think of the pressure going into this tournament on the University of Kentucky, and especially John Calipari. Now, they have not been to the Elite 8, okay? So that means they have not played more than 3 games in a tournament since 2018. Kentucky has not been to a Final Four. This is Kentucky we're talking about here. Has not been to a Final Four since 2014. Cal gets it. The pressure is there. We know that UC, Xavier, and Ohio State will play in the NIT. Xavier's playing on the road tomorrow night at Georgia. So 2 thoughts here before we talk about UC. One, it goes to show you sometimes, and we're quick to jump on people who have sources and then they turn out to be wrong, right? Like our buddy Zim Hude.
Yeah.
Right? The whole T. Higgins thing. Okay, and then people go south on him. They say you can't believe him anymore. Okay? Mm-hmm. All right, well, I'm going to put myself in his shoes for a minute because the same thing happened to me last week. Same thing. I'm talking to this guy who is up there inside of Xavier basketball, right?
Right.
Social conversation. And if there's somebody that should know this stuff, or you would think would know this stuff, it's this guy. We'll leave him unnamed. He tells me Xavier, under no circumstances, is going to play in the NIT. Not going to happen. They will turn it down like St. John's did, like Pitt did, right?
Right.
These teams have said, nope, we're not playing it, which I think is a mistake. But that's for another conversation. But I was told it's already decided they are not going to play in the NIT. Well, guess what? They are. Now, what surprises me is that they're playing a road game. Now, I haven't watched a lot of Georgia basketball this year. That's who they're playing tomorrow night in Georgia. I would find it hard to believe if they're going to draw over 10,000 fans, and you know Xavier would have drawn over 10,000 fans if they played that game at Cintas tomorrow night. UC will host San Francisco. That'll be Wednesday night. And the Ohio State Buckeyes will host Cornell tomorrow night. Lots more on the NCAA tournament coming up. But speaking of Ohio State, remember all that talk a few days ago about Sean Miller, maybe Dusty May becoming the next coach in Columbus? Well, forget it. That interim tag is gone for Jake Diebler. And you know what? Good for Ohio State. He got a 5-year deal yesterday after leading the Buckeyes to 7 wins in 9 games, including wins at Michigan State. He beat Purdue. They won a couple of games in the Big Ten tournament. Should have won that game against Illinois. And then at that point, you're playing in the championship game. But they got beat. So good for him. All right, in soccer, FC Cincinnati, your guys, Casey.
That's right.
2-1 win yesterday. Showed some offense. If 2 wins is what offense is, they showed, or 2 goals rather, they showed some offense.
Yeah, they finally got some production out of their MVP, and Kubo, out of all the guys, had a score as well. I was kind of shocked that he would be one of the first guys to score for FC in an MLS-sanctioned game. But, hey, it came off of back-to-back, basically, drives. That's what I would call it, drives, possessions, happening in the 52nd minute and the 54th minute. Good for FC to finally find the back of the net.
Yep.
And, I think that they're still working on getting that chemistry down. I mean, I said it at the start of the season for FC that they have historically tended to struggle at the beginning of the year, putting together their team chemistry. When you lose 2 really big roles like Vasquez, like you're going to struggle. So they right now are in a good spot. I think they're finally getting some groove going. Acosta's getting his footing underneath of him. When he starts going, this team goes. So that's what's most important.
Okay. All right. So we'll keep an eye on them. Long season. It goes from now until eternity because of all the breakups in the season. So they'll be playing in September, October, right?
Yeah.
And we're in the 3rd week of March, 2nd week of March. All right, now it's the Reds. I got to tell you, and I try to look at things from the glass half full point of view. I try. Not always successful, but try. Okay? I am a little concerned about some very specific things with this team as we are less than 2 weeks away from opening day. So let's focus to start primarily on pitching. And this is not only starting pitching, but the bullpen. It seems like every time we turn around, literally every time you turn around, someone is coming up injured, or they're having to miss a start, or they're having to be taken out of a game as a precaution. Okay? And then the guys that are pitching and healthy, they're not pitching all that well. I mean, Montas, people who are out there say if the eye test will tell you he looks really, really good. I don't know. Hunter Green, Graham Ashcraft, all have been average at best. Then over the weekend, lefty Andrew Abbott, who had an outstanding year last year, he scratched from his start. So that means a golden chance for the seemingly forgotten Brandon Williamson, who pitched very well for this team last year. I mean, I thought that he would be very much in the hunt for a spot in the rotation, And he appeared to be on the outside looking in until all these guys started getting hurt. So he gets a start in place of Abbott. And what's he do? In the first inning, he walks 3 straight batters, including walking in a run. The next inning, he hits a guy to bring in a run. He allows 4 runs in 2 innings, and they have to take him out of the game as a precaution with a sore shoulder. And then there's Nick Martinez, who has been without a doubt the best pitcher the Reds have run out there. He's looked fabulous, but that's when he's pitching. Now, remember, they told us this story about a week ago about a displaced rib, that he's had this thing before. Now, look, I'm not a doctor, okay? But you tell me, when you think about just the mechanics of a pitcher and the torque when they're revving back and now they're coming through to throw, I mean, just look at this whole thing here, right? Think of the torque in the oblique area, right? Same thing with a hitter. When I start hearing oblique and rib and stuff like that, I mean a hitter, the violence of turning through and hitting the ball. Pitcher, pitch after pitch after pitch. Batters can take a pitch and not swing the bat. Pitcher's got to keep on pitching, right? Now, I have long said I don't believe this stuff when teams tell us about injuries. I don't believe them. And it's not that they're intentionally lying. We're in this day and age of HIPAA and all this kind of thing, so you got to be careful, right? But this Nick Martinez thing to me does not sound good. Then all of a sudden you've got the left-handers in the bullpen. Sam Moll, Alex Young, they're hurt. They bring in Justin Wilson off the scrap heap, who's been injured for 2 years. We already know that Nick Lodolo will start the season on the injured list as he's still trying to come back from that broken tibia. So you got that. Oh, and by the way, the one guy, and we talked about this last week with Charlie Goldsmith, the one guy I continue to really pay attention to is Alexis Diaz. His velocity is way down, and he does not look good so far this spring. That's their closer. Now, of course, all the analytics people out there will say, well, a closer, anybody can do that job. Well, we have seen that's not true. Okay, they can argue all they want. It's not true. Not just anybody can be your closer. They might be able to do it for a few days, a week. Maybe you'll catch lightning in a bottle with a guy that steps in there and does something he's never done before. But there are a lot of really good pitchers out there who are great in the 6th inning, great in the 7th, great in the 8th, and they ain't great in the 9th. So let's hope that the Diaz is not hurt. So now you get to the position players. Now, you have heard me say before, okay, that I don't get wrapped up in the stats of spring training. But let's start, first of all, with another injury. T.J. Friedl. Diving attempt on a ball in the outfield on Saturday. Turns out he's got a broken wrist. So we're looking at months for T.J. Friedl coming back. This guy, to me, if you had an infielder hurt, you have so much talent and so many players that are capable of filling in for one of their infielders. Okay, so, if Candelario got hurt, you'd say to yourself, okay, well, we got Encarnacion Strand. Steers played third before. There are things we can do, India, move guys around. We feel like we'll be okay. With Friedl, all of a sudden you're saying, okay, Will Benson and Stuart Fairchild. In fairness to Fairchild, he has had a remarkable spring. I don't know if you've paid much attention, but he used to have the big high leg kick. He changed his training method during the offseason, all this kind of stuff, right? And he looks like an entirely different player. But again, it's spring training, okay? But Fairchild and Benson playing regularly in center, how do you feel about that? All right, I just said I don't get wrapped up in stats, right? What about Matt McClain? I talked about the oblique here a minute ago, okay? Mine's all fat. His isn't, okay? He's played over a week now, and he doesn't have a hit. Now, I don't want to sound like I am, saying stats matter and then they don't matter. Maybe it sounds like that. Probably does sound like that. It is that. But I have to tell you, I hope McClain's all right, because many believe that he might be the most important player on this team. I think TJ Friedel could make that argument. And now all of a sudden you're out with him for a couple of months. So, Casey, the Reds, you're a little concerned too.
Yeah, I mean, all I heard for now it feels like weeks was the way that this team was going to be successful was by staying healthy. And they are dropping like flies.
Yep.
I mean, everyone's just getting hurt now. The little nagging injuries, nothing season ending, but this stuff tends to just linger all the time. They don't always come back the way that you expect them to. And, you know, you need guys like TJ Friedel because there is no depth there. We have all the infield depth in the world, but have neglected the outfield depth, which, I mean, I don't think anyone was clamoring for us to go get another center fielder, but now we're in that position where we might be a little screwed.
Well, you know, Nick Kroll said he is not ruling out going outside the organization on this thing, but the one guy that we talked about on this show that was out there was Michael Taylor, and over the weekend the Pirates signed him. Now, I'm not saying there aren't other guys, and I'm not saying that Stuart Fairchild and Will Benson, a lot of people around here are ready to make Will Benson the next Eric Davis. He's not. Now, might he be? He might be, and we're about to find out. So, yeah, I mean, there's so much optimism here and so much excitement, and rightfully so, after the way this group played last year and assembling all this young talent. But it just seems like guys, and maybe it's true with other teams too. I don't follow them as closely as the Reds. It just seems like guys are hurt all the time.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, it does feel like we just keep getting more and more players added to this injury list. Thom, at what point do not just MLB, but other professional leagues shorten their preseason or get rid of it entirely? I mean, they started training. They brought in pitchers and catchers early February.
Yep.
We are halfway through, technically, a little more than halfway through their spring training, their preseason. That just blows me away that we've been doing this whole shindig now for almost 2 months. It will be 2 months by the time opening day comes around.
Just about 2 months.
And if they're not going to do that, or when are we going to start having, like, just never starting the starters? I mean, like, I don't know how you do that in baseball because you got to have a full-on roster to be able you have to have 2 rosters basically to be able to do that. But like in football, they have, you know, overloaded rosters and they make cuts.
Yep.
Preseason week 1, they tend to do that as the time goes on. Baseball, they don't have that. They just kind of have their starters play a couple innings and then they come out and then they do the rotation thing. But it just seems like that doesn't even matter. They still get hurt. They're still training very hard during, when they're not playing games.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you know, there was a time, and I don't want to sound like the old guy, you know, get off my lawn thing, but I mean, I worked with guys like Ron Santo, Hall of Famer, and he'd talk about how back in those days the money wasn't anywhere close to what it is now, and how guys had to have jobs in the offseason. Okay, now we know those days are long gone, and they should be long gone. These guys are making the money that they've earned. They've worked their whole lives to get here. But they're in better shape now than they've ever been. Ever. I mean, the things these guys are doing in the offseason, they're hiring private trainers. I don't have the answer. Maybe you do. I just don't understand how, you know, we're just seeing so many, and I'm not talking about the Friedels of the world. That's a total freak injury thing. But I'm talking about the stuff with obliques and about ribs and about a sore shoulder.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's just like, man, it
Yeah, when you start talking about like muscle tears and stuff like that, that's a whole different conversation. That's an overuse of the muscle, right?
Yep.
That's the muscle failing.
Well, and a lot of people have made that argument. Chris Welsh, my partner with the Reds for many, many years, he firmly believes that guys are overtraining too much. Yeah. Too much. All right. Last thing, a couple people have pointed out this thing with the, we talked about UC and Xavier, and I mentioned Xavier and this bad information I got. They weren't going to play in the NIT. I'm really glad they are playing in the NIT. I think it gives your fans a chance to continue to watch a team they really like and follow. I think it gives your seniors, and for UC and Xavier, they really don't have a lot of those. I mean, you've got Newman the third for UC. You've got Oliveri, who was only here for 1 year, so you get to watch them play at least once, maybe more than that if they make a deep run in the tournament. So I'm glad they're both playing it. Aren't you?
Yeah, I'm glad. Part of me wants to see the rematch, right? And it wouldn't have as much significance, but maybe it does. It's kind of like the bragging rights thing that you lost to them again or beat them in the NIT. I'm talking about UC and Xavier here.
Yep.
Crosstown Shootout Part 2. I don't know how the bracket for the NIT works.
It would take.
Yet,
I think they have to get to the championship game for them to play.
But I think that's out of all the teams, we all said that UC is probably a good chance to at least compete for that.
Yep.
I don't know about Xavier. Xavier's pretty good, but I just don't know who they play. They play Georgia. I don't know much about Georgia. I'd have to look into a little bit more, but it would be really fun to see that. And if it was the championship, even better, because then there would be bragging rights for the NIT banner and all that other stuff, and it would just be, Crosstown Shootout 2.0.
That's right.
A little more to
It would be fun. We got a ways to go to get there, but it certainly would be a lot of fun. So, look, we got the basketball tournament that officially starts tomorrow night. I just, and I'm not going to get into it today because you could talk about it forever. But there's one team playing tomorrow night that I just can't believe is in this tournament ahead of so many other teams, and that's Virginia. Okay? My whole family's from Virginia. I love the University of Virginia. I love their coach, Bennett. I mean, he is a top-shelf, awesome guy, good family man, great leader, great coach. But, man, when you sit there and you look at Virginia, who got invited to this tournament, okay, and you start hunting around, they are 69th in the Ken Palm. 69th. And Rick Pitino said it yesterday. He said, there are serious faults in the way that we're determining who's going to the NCAA tournament. Virginia will play in Dayton. So you've got teams like St. John's, 25th in the Ken Palm. Wake Forest in their own conference, 31st in the Ken Palm. Cincinnati, 37th. Pittsburgh in the ACC, 40th. Virginia is 69th and got a bid to this tournament. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Especially when you start looking at some of these Mountain West teams behind Cincinnati, Colorado State, Boise State, Washington State in the Pac-12. Washington State, they're a 7th seed. They're 42nd in the Ken Palm with a strength of schedule 84. UC's 36. All right. We'll let all of you debate it. We will back here on Friday. We got coming up at 10 o'clock right here on Chatterbox. We have Off the Bench. Are all the guys back safe, sound from the big road trip?
I do believe so. Trace and Elliott made it back yesterday morning. They drove 27 hours straight.
Oh, my gosh.
From Phoenix to Cincinnati. Well, I guess Hamilton. Which then Elliott had had another drive that was about an hour from here to his house. So he had 28 hours worth of driving.
Holy Moses.
But they're all back safe and sound. I believe that Kirby's back home. He flew back from Phoenix to Cleveland. So I think all the guys are back safe and sound. I think Reds Daly's also back. He was with them as well for a bit. And, they'll be back here, I guess, tomorrow.
Okay.
They'll be able to talk about their trip and let us know how it went. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm glad they're back, and it was fun following those guys on their trip. They looked like they had a great time. We're all glad the boys are back. Thank the Lord, safe and sound. All right, Casey, thanks for everything, my friend.
Of course.
Multi-award-winning producer, Casey McAllister.
I don't know if I've won any awards yet, but I'd love to.
They're on the way.
They're on the way.
They're on the way.
I already got one title named ex-producer, but
Well, you earned that one that day.
I
But
did.
you're still here.
I'm still here, though.
You're still here. Okay. All right, we come back your way again on Friday. Again, that'll be at high noon Eastern time, following Off the Bench. And, of course, we'll already be a day into the NCAA tournament at that point. But this is going to be a fun ride. It's always a great time of year. Some people say the best. I totally disagree with that. I think the fall is much better when you've got baseball playoffs, college football, NFL being played. But this would be a runner-up with the NCAA tournament, the March Madness, and the start of Major League Baseball. All right, so we'll look forward to seeing each and every one of you on Friday. Thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate you guys jumping on board. So many of you in the chat and so many watching and downloading. Just search for Dialed In with Thom Brennaman wherever you get your podcast, and you will find us there. Have a great day.